Crossy, welcome to the podcast. You're currently in quarantine in New Zealand, prepping for a series. How's all that going for you?
And at the moment, I'm day 6 of day 14, so I'm doing all right. But I think we're just pretty lucky that we've been able to get out of our own country, to be honest. Obviously, it's not great in the UK at the minute, so I think we're just kind of counting our blessings. And as tough as this period's going to be, not being able to train and stuff in light of a series coming up, it's just going to be great. We're going to get some more cricket. We've not had anything since September, so yeah, just a blessing in disguise, I reckon.
Yeah, it must be good to actually get out of the UK. I bet family and friends are probably a little bit jealous. How have you coped with the lockdown period at home? And now you're saying you haven't played September and you've got games coming up. Is there anything that's really challenged you, or have you had? I know a lot of people have had really good benefits out of something, a change in schedule. Have you found it good, bad, indifferent?
I've kind of probably been through all the motions, to be honest. The initial period for me, we came back from the World Cup in March, and I had a pretty bad injury, so it was pressure off me at the beginning. I got the opportunity to rehab, and I was literally learning to walk again. I was in the moon boot, so it was I was kind of a little bit stressed when I did that injury that I might not make the summer series. So yeah, in that respect, it was really good. I got a bit of time away, time with the family. Like I said, no pressure of needing to get back to cricket. But then I think I've heard this with a lot of people, but kind of like the fear of the unknown then hit me a little bit. And when was cricket going to come back? When was I going to have my normal routines? Just even the fact that we're only contracted for a year was a bit of a worry when your contract's coming up in April, and how, if you've not played any cricket, how are you going to get the ECB to pay you again for another year? So I kind of ebbed and flowed through it all, to be honest. I had the podcast that me and Hartley do it actually took a bit of a priority in the first lockdown that we had in the UK. It kind of gave us a bit of a focus to do it every week because there was just nothing else to do. You're literally stuck indoors. We were blessed with a bit of sunshine actually, which was nice, but we kind of got stuck into that, and that's now grown quite a lot since then, which it's been quite nice to see, something that I'm quite proud of actually. But yeah, we've just kind of been it's been a bit bitty. We've either kind of like been back in training as a whole group, or you're on your own at home doing your home workouts or going out running, whatever it's been. So it's certainly been a challenge, but without sounding too cliche, it's kind of been something that I've really learned from. And I know I'll look back on this and possibly in this series that we've got coming up and, really not take stuff for granted anymore, which, if there is a good thing that can come out of a global pandemic, I guess that's it.
Yeah, it's funny. Everyone I've spoken to has said pretty similar things, where one part's that fear of the unknown, which is actually prevalent in everyday life with or without COVID. And as I'm sure we'll get into down the track, it's a lot of the cause of performance anxiety and things like that. But at the same time, coming back to gratitude for the ability to go out with friends and the simple things. I remember when we went out for our first walk without a mask on, all us Victorians were going nuts. We almost felt naked. We're like, what is this? Like, we can walk and breathe fresh air. It's unbelievable. And never would you think that I'm just going to go for a walk and be so grateful and almost like on a high just to be able to breathe fresh air.
Yeah. Honestly, leaving the UK a week ago, it was illegal to go walking with someone outside of your household bubble. So, like, just what is that? How has life got to that? It blew my mind a little bit. But yeah, like you said, it's kind of just given me a bit of newfound gratitude for my family and my friends, and just simple go and getting a coffee. I've not been out and had a coffee in a cafe for about 4 or 5 months now, and God, I know that'd kill you, Barb.
I wouldn't last very long, no. But speaking of your family and friends, if we wind it back to when you first got into sport, cricket, fairly well documented, your family's pretty talented with your dad, David Psycho Cross, a West Ham legend, which we both know. I'm a big EPL fan as well. Your sister's a netballer, brother's also a really talented cricketer. Backyard battles back in the day, was it always cricket, or were you into a whole range of sports?
Yeah, pretty much into anything that I was good at actually. I kind of avoided the stuff I wasn't good at, which ironically is football for us, or soccer, whatever you guys call it. I don't know. No, football's AFL, isn't it?
Well, a bit of both, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so soccer, no good at that. So I was very heavily influenced by my older brother and sister, I think being the youngest of three, you kind of get dragged along a lot, and yeah, forced to bowl at brothers and play netball with sisters. So I was probably really influenced by them, but still at no point I don't think I was ever kind of forced into playing sport. You know, if I'd picked something else, and I'm sure I would have been supported with that, but it was just that cricket and netball and sport was just quite prevalent in our lives when I was a kid. So I think naturally just went down that path.
So why did you end up sort of choosing cricket as more of a profession?
It was a massive part of our lives. I mean, you'll know this, and anyone that does play cricket knows it's not just turning up, playing 90 minutes of a sport and going home. There's like so much community around it. I remember all my childhoods when I was a kid just spending down at my cricket club, which is Haywood, and it was the Central Lancashire League back a couple of years ago. It's all changed now, but from the north of England. So like a Saturday just and a Sunday for us in the summer was just always spent down there, and it was probably more of an opportunity for my parents to drop me off. Like, you know, they could watch the cricket and I'm off playing with my mates, and they knew as long as I was within the gates of the club, I was pretty safe, and there was always people there to babysit me or look after me if needs be. So I think that was, as I've got older, that's been a massive drive for me in terms of why I play cricket now, and I think it probably influenced me more than I was aware of when I was a kid. But I think I was just good at it. Without, I hope that didn't sound arrogant, but I was just a girl who, there wasn't many girls playing cricket at the time, and I kind of stood out, and I liked the fact that I did stand out, and I got a bit of attention for that. Maybe I'm a bit arrogant, I don't know. But yeah, I think there's something in it, a little bit in it about proving people wrong as well, because I was the only girl. You know, you'd naturally get that chat when you turn up. I'm sure you've had it. I'm sure all the girls our age have had it. But yeah, I just kind of like the idea of people judging me immediately and me being able to kind of put them wrong.
Yeah, speaking of proving people wrong, and you were bloody good because you played for Lancs as a very young teenager, and in 2006 you were the first woman in the Lancs Academy. That seemed to have caused quite a stir from what I've read, in that you were apparently taking a male spot in the academy, you were the first woman, this isn't right, you're not at that level. There's a whole lot of media stir around it. How did that affect you? Did it inspire you to prove people wrong, or did it sort of underlie a few more self-doubts about, should I really be here?
No, I think it definitely spurred me on more at the time. I think I was backed by the head coach, which was the main thing for me. John Stanworth, I've spoke about him quite a lot in my cricket journey, as him being like a really influential figure to me, mostly because he made that decision to put me on the academy, and like you said, it hadn't been done before, so there was that media attention around it, but John always maintained that he picked me on talent and nothing to do with sex, which he said, you know, there's nothing in the rule books about how I pick my academy. If they're good enough, they're going to be on it. And I think there was a bit of, I don't know if this is actually factually correct, but I had heard that Lancashire would get payments if anyone from their pathway went on to play for England. And everyone was saying, well, I can't get paid to play for England because it wasn't professional. So how is it going to benefit Lancashire for me to be on the academy? I don't know how much truth there is in that, but it did make a bit of sense back then. But for me, it was just my passion, and that kind of drove me then to want to be better at cricket, because it was that time of my life where I was 15, 16. I was playing netball quite high standard at the time, so I could have kind of pursued that if I wanted to, and there was more girls doing that as well, so that would have been the easier path to choose. But yeah, I think it just gave me a bit of a realization that people cared. You know, everyone that, it's like people who comment on social media and say no one cares about women's cricket, but they've cared enough to comment. And it was kind of that feeling of people, well, you're talking about it, so it's probably a bit of a bigger deal than I knew. But I think, again, like, hindsight's a beautiful thing, but I think I've only really been able to appreciate that part of my life now, 5 years ago to now, because it was quite a turning point for me. And ironically, I'd not done any media training. That was the week number 2 of our academy training, was how to deal with the media, and I'd done all these interviews before I got there, and me and Stanny still joke about that now, that I just was live on Sky Sports and just learning as I went, and yeah, I think that probably is a little bit, that kind of sums my career up a little bit, you know, being one of the first female to do a few things I've kind of just learned as I've gone.
Yeah, and that's, I suppose, our generation is quite a common story in that we weren't professional. We were thrown in the deep end at points, and at different points have grown with the game. And if we go back to when you went from Lancashire Academy into then the England Academy, you obviously put in some good performances that snuffed you out as, okay, she's a pretty good cricketer, something for the future. But what did the England Academy look like back then as opposed to now when it is a little bit more professional?
Yeah, it's a good question actually. It was, for me, it was an opportunity to do more cricket and to do cricket with girls, which I kind of been used to playing with the boys at my local club or the boys on the Lancashire Academy. So it was a bit unknown territory for me, but it was, I think we generally trained like once a month and you'd go down to Loughborough for a full weekend. And they were pretty intense weekends. Like you got the DOMS on the Monday, you couldn't, you're going into school and you look like the Tin Man because you just couldn't walk. But yeah, it was probably a lot more skill based back then. And I feel like now there's a lot more depth to how the girls are coached in the academy. You know, there's a lot more nutritional help, fitness help. Um, and not that obviously the skill based stuff is still there, but I think it's just a more athletic program, if that makes sense, rather than you're here to play cricket, you're here to bowl or bat or field. Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot more support for them, and like psychological help as well. I think everyone's really aware now of the girls that are in the academy it's a strange generation because they're still the generation that played for the love of the game, but there's now money involved and there's that drive to be professional now, which when I was in the academy that wasn't there. I was just loved the game and wanted to try and play for England and play the highest standard that I could.
So that drive of yours back then, do you think that came from more so like, did you have that need to do well and that need to perform, or was it more just, I love this, I'm always going to work hard because that's naturally my talent and we'll see what happens?
I don't actually know. I don't think I've ever been able to answer that question honestly. I think I was very competitive as a kid, and just loved playing sport, whatever that might have been, whatever I was doing at school, not necessarily cricket outside of school. But I think I almost got caught up in a lot of people telling me that I was going to play for England, and I'd not really, I didn't wake up every morning and think everything I'm going to do today is going to get me one step closer to playing for England. I think I was more of a, if it happens, it happens, that kind of mentality. But I think I got caught up in this whirlwind of everyone saying, "Oh, you've been the first girl in the Lancashire Academy. You've been involved with the England Academy since you were 16. The next step is England, so you'll play for England." And I think I then completely took that for granted, and then didn't push myself, didn't go out of my comfort zone. Um, Again, like I was quite young, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was kind of just going through the motions of people telling me what to do and turning up at Loughborough and doing what the schedule said, and didn't really know how it looked other than that. But I think I've learned that with becoming professional and having more influence and more people around me who can help me, I guess, see what professionalism actually looks like.
So then you've pretty much been put on this pathway that says you're going to play for England, and there's all this expectation around it. In 2011, you finally get called up into an England squad to tour, but you didn't actually make your debut until 2013. So that's a long 2 years to be in and around a squad where you always just expected you'd turn up, in a way, with obviously working hard in there, but it was a long year pathway. How did you navigate those 2 years where you're literally that close, but not quite there?
If you'd have asked me what those dates were and how long that phase actually was, I reckon I'd have told you it was about a 5-year gap. Like that's almost how long that period felt for me. And a lot happened in that time. Geez, that was a whirlwind for me because, like you said, I got called up and I thought, well, they've got injuries. They're flying me out to Australia for 2 weeks. Obviously, I'm going to play. So I kind of psyched myself up on the plane journey over that I was actually going to make my debut. And then when I got there, it was just the most bizarre situation. Like no senior player, no head coach sat me down and spoke to me and said, "This is your expectations. There's a good chance you're going to play, or there's a good chance you're just here to kind of fill some numbers." and so yeah, it was a bizarre 2 weeks, and I kind of like, it was just a bit of a whirlwind. And when I got back from that, I remember sitting down with my mum and dad and saying, it's not for me, this. I went over there. It was a great opportunity to travel to Oz, but the girls work really hard, and I don't, and I'm just, I don't think that's for me. Like, they were all running after the games, and I was like, well, why are the 12th, 13th, and 14th all doing fitness sessions? Like, it's a day off for us. So again, that like professionalism that I didn't understand hit me quite hard. And my mum and dad were pretty good, actually. They said, if you don't enjoy it, you need to step back and see how you go. And I was at uni at the time as well, so I was kind of juggling the added pressure of the university study. It's obviously a lot harder than when you're at school. But yeah, it was Lisa, who we know. I'm sure you've probably spoken about her on the podcast before. But yeah, Lisa, she was the head of the academy at the time, and within that 2 years, might have been the winter that I came back from Australia, she was the one that said, we're dropping you. You're not in the academy anymore. You've not been turning in performances. So I'd literally gone from thinking I was making my England debut to then that winter not even making the academy. So it was a pretty big fall from grace, to be honest. But I do remember I remember where I was when I got the phone call. I was in South France on holiday with my mum, and I remember getting this phone call, and it shocked me that she'd dropped me. And I remember being really happy because someone had made a decision for me that I couldn't make. I'd found it too difficult to make because I was too scared of letting people around me down, letting my parents down, letting all those people who told me I was going to play for England, letting them down and their expectations down. So yeah, it was a tough 2 years, but I needed it. It was, again, hindsight, it's an amazing thing. And I needed that 2 years to actually take a step back to see if I was willing to put a bit more effort in and a bit more hard work.
That's really interesting because Lisa actually mentioned that phone call to me when she sat down for a coffee with me, and also told me that I was getting dropped from WA 2 years ago. And she mentioned your name and said, look, I had this exact conversation with Crossy when I was at the academy, and she gave her the option, said, look, you've got a lot of talent, we know you're good, etc., etc., but you're just not quite cracking it at the moment. And for me, it was 8 years in the program. I'd literally been going to the WACA since I was 13, so for 13 years I'd been rocking up in June for pre-season. And when she tells you that, I was completely shocked, but at the same time I had the exact same experience where I was like, well, I'd been almost getting dropped for 8 years and it was almost like a relief. But I don't think I've told you this, but the last sort of 2 years I've always kind of kept you in the back of my mind, where she said, it'll be the same thing. You're going to go away. You're going to wonder, do I want to do this? Do I not want to do this? There's no right or wrong. But you'll hit a point where you come back. And if you do want to come back, you'll come back with a new perspective. And it's pretty much followed close to the exact same timeline and the exact same sort of headspace that you're working through the whole way through. And then, like, I've obviously ended up in Melbourne playing Viking Stars here. You're back in the England squad, but I kind of have you to thank in a way to that same comment. Or Lisa, maybe we can both just bag Lisa out and say it was your fault. But it's a pretty cool story how it's kind of matched up in that perspective.
Yeah, and I think I think it happens so much in sport, and I think it's that like classic story, isn't it, that success isn't just a straight line of A to B. There's so much that goes on in between, that a lot of it is behind closed doors for people as well. They don't know, like my family obviously knew what I went through, and I've spoken openly about it since, but like really it's just you battling yourself a lot of the time. And now I'm sure you can absolutely relate to it, but it just gave me the opportunity to come back and enjoy cricket for that little kid that played it when I was in the garden with my brother or sister or down at my cricket club. And it kind of really, it took the pressure off me a lot as well, because I then wasn't the England Academy player when I turned up to play for Lancs that season. And I had my best season that I've probably to date that I've ever had, because there was just no pressure on me.
And that's the very reason we're doing this podcast. And it's about finding that kid again. And literally every single guest, without me directly saying it to them, has come up with the same story. I've gone to a point, I've lost something, rediscovered where I started in the first place, and therefore my success is actually better than trying so hard. And it's a weird way, the way the mind works. And it's actually, it sounds ridiculous. It sounds ridiculous that the answer is almost do what you did when you were 5. But it's what it is.
I don't think you can have that without the experience of
Yeah.
the disappointment and the failure and all that, because it doesn't make sense to you if you've not been through it. And it's such an easy thing to do, is just, oh, enjoy the game. Well, yeah, but actually now I'm getting paid for it. There's a lot more to it than just go out and enjoy yourself. I can't be the 16-year-old that went down to Hayward on a Saturday and mucked about. I probably could be, but I'd lose my job.
Yeah, it's a fine balance, I reckon. So, like for me, I call it, that's the art of performance, is the ability to actually go back to that kid in the midst of, if I don't perform today, I lose my contract, I lose my money, I'm going to lose my position in the team, I'm going to let all these people down. There's all this stuff. You can't just be like, I'm going to enjoy it. Okay, simple. I'm going to score 100 every game for the rest of the season. Like, there's a whole lot of shit to deal with. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I think the key to actually being able to let go and actually surrender comes back to the skill of letting go and finding that why you play in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure we'll go into it, but I kind of had that phase again in my career. So I've kind of had that twice. I know we are going to talk about it, but that, what you just said there resonates with me so much, because, well, you asked me the questions because I think we're going to go into it, so I don't want to jump the gun.
That's all right. We just roll. Yeah. Well, so we've got to a point where you've been dropped from the academy. You come back in, you've made your debut for England, you've got player of the match against West Indies, you've had a really good Ashes series. That's the first time I saw you play in Perth, the WACA. I think it was about 50 degrees that day. It was mad.
I think I'm still sunburnt from that game.
In 2015, 2016, so you've now made your England debut. You're in the system, probably not as consistent as you would have liked, probably maybe born at the wrong time, as Shrubsole and Brunt being incredible at what they do in terms of pace bowling. But then if we go to what you mentioned before, 2016, where you're playing a game at home versus Pakistan, and I've heard you describe that day where you're saying it's a little bit of a setback again. So you found how you want to live, but this is what you said. So I remember being a third man. I bowled an over and it didn't go very well. I put my sunglasses on and I had tears in my eyes. I remember thinking, I'm so out of my depth. I don't know what I'm doing here. So where do we start in terms of the transition from, hey, I found out I play for the love of the game, I'm going to enjoy it, I'm having this great time, I made my England debut, and now you're quite literally crying on a cricket field, not knowing why on earth you're playing?
Yeah. Geez, where do we start? I think a lot of it, in truth, came from us turning professional. So we turned professional in the March of 2014. So all my debuts, literally my T20, my one day, and my test debut had happened before that. And I was kind of in that golden phase of nothing can go wrong. I've got nothing to lose. You don't know how you're going to stand in international cricket. So just go out and do what you've done to get you where you've got to. And then we turned professional, and it was like someone flipped a switch on me. I know I'm not the only girl that's been through this in the system, but like this, it just felt like this pressure just kind of descended on us, and it might have been imagined, or it might have been relatively real with the added pressure that came from, or the scrutiny that came from the press that we got. But we lost a test match to India the first year that we were professional, and everyone was like, well, why? You're getting paid now, you must be brilliant. And it was almost like we were trying to fight with people's opinions of women's cricket as well as ourselves and our own expectations. But just because you're getting a certain amount of money in your bank account doesn't make you a better cricketer. It's going to take time to do that. And I think we kind of just thought that we were going to be this number one team now because we were getting paid. And don't get me wrong, it wasn't enough money to solely live off. Like, you needed to have some coaching income or something else on the side. So as much as we were fully professional, it wasn't, it was nowhere near what the men were doing, or you weren't comfortable with your earnings. So that was when it kind of started going downhill from me. And it was like everything I'd learned in that first Lisa dropping me phase kind of just fell out of my head, and I had to relearn all that again. But the thing that I really recognized with the 2016 phase was how poor my mental health was, and how much the decline of that couldn't get pulled back by cricket, which it had done in the past. I've always been the person that when I exercise, my mental health generally is better. It's like one of my go-tos. and that it now wasn't helping me. So going out and exercising and playing cricket was making me worse. And I got to that stage of not knowing if cricket was my trigger or my saviour. And so the 2016 was the biggest mental health breakdown that I've ever had. I've not been quiet about that. I've spoken quite openly about it, but yeah, that game against Pakistan, I just remember thinking that I'd somehow tricked everyone into getting me onto that pitch that day. And I think I put a lot of pressure on myself because it was the first game that my entire family had got to. Like, my mum had been to a game, my dad had been to a game, but everyone, mum, dad, Bobby and Jem, my brother and sister, all got on in there that day. It was a family day that we do with the ECB. And I just remember thinking, like, I'm not performing. They've come to see me play, and I'm having an absolute shocker. Everyone was taking wickets around me, and I wasn't. So I was questioning my skill level. And yeah, I just remember like being in that place where you just overcome with emotion, and I thought, God, this is not the time to be doing this. You're live on Sky Sports. Do not cry. Just whatever you do not cry. And it was just, I was just looking around and I was seeing like all the girls break these records. Like Lauren got a first 100 and Tammy got 100 that game, I think. And Siva had the quickest 50 that anyone for England women have ever had. And I was thinking, well, why am I not breaking any records? What's happened here for me not to be as good as the rest of my team? And yeah, that was obviously then the start of a pretty big decline for me.
So following that, did you have to navigate more of that tour? Were you able to go home and take a bit of a spell from the game? What did the next couple of weeks look like?
I couldn't tell you. I don't remember from, oh God, I'm guessing those games were around June time. I'm assuming we might have played a KSL. We must have done, really, because I think 2016 was the launch of the KSL. But the next thing that I really remember vividly was early October, being in Loughborough again. We were back training, and I remember sitting down with, well, I'd had a massive battle to get to Loughborough in the first place. I wasn't going to go. I'd had a breakdown in the kitchen of my parents' house because I was still living at home then. I was literally just sat eating my porridge crying, just tears streaming out of my eyes. And I was just like this overwhelming sense of sadness, like just everything about me. Just like, if I had to draw a picture of myself, it'd almost be like really like enclosed and just almost like a bit of a shell of myself. And my dad came in the kitchen and he was like, what on earth has happened? Like, something catastrophic must have happened for me to be in the state I was in. And I just said to him, I said, it's the thought of going to Loughborough. And he was all right, something's not right. You know, you need to speak to whoever you need to speak to, but you need to either go back to bed or just stay here with us. And the only reason that I got down to Loughborough that day was because I was picking Sophie Eccleston up because she was too young to drive. So she's like en route for me. So I was picking her up on the way. And bless her, she was only 15 or 16 herself at the time. So for me to have picked her up in the state I was in, she didn't say a word in the car. And if you've met Soph, she's a talker. So, you know, it must have been really clear that I was not in a good place. And I got down to Loughborough and I couldn't even bear the thought of being in the same room as the girls. I couldn't go in the dressing room. So I went in the physio room, which I was really close to the physio at the time. And I just hid in there for a couple of hours. And then sat down with Robbo, the head coach. And he made the decision for me, told me to get away from the game. And I think there was an element of, again, me not wanting to let people down, not wanting to let my teammates down. So him making that decision for me was a bit of a blessing, to be honest. He said, you know, get away, go on holiday, just spend some time away from cricket and try and sort your head out, and then we'll work it out when you get back. But I remember thinking that if I had that conversation with Robbo, that would ultimately jeopardise my place in the World Cup squad the next year, the 2017 home World Cup squad, which you're going to get once in a lifetime as a cricketer. And I knew that if I had that conversation with him, then that was that. So as you can imagine, I was like, can I scrape my way through this? Can I keep going until maybe January, February, and then get myself into that squad? Or do I tell him, be really honest, probably more honest with my teammates, because I'm not going to be the best version of myself for that period of time if I carried on. And obviously I had the conversation with him, and that ultimately meant that 2017 was one that I sat from the stands and watched, which was pretty traumatic, to be honest.
Yeah, how do you navigate that 2017 World Cup? That's one of the worst feelings like I've ever had, is watching the team that you're so close to win finals or get into finals, but to have it as a home World Cup, like a 50 over, it's pretty much as high as it gets. And
Yeah.
as you say, a once in a lifetime. How on earth did you navigate that?
I don't think I did, to be honest. I mean, my drive for a lot of it. So I got back from that really tough period in the October, and I started to feel better quite instantly because I just blurted all this stuff out to our psych, and we did a lot of pretty grueling work, to be honest. About I thought I knew myself. I thought I understood who I was as a person. Turns out I had no idea, and I needed a bloke who had been in the system for 12 months to sit me down and tell me what was going on in my own head, which I found so powerful, but also kind of degrading a little bit because, like I said, I thought I knew myself. So by the time it got round to our pre-season, kind of like March, April time tour, I was thinking, I'm ready for this. I'm ready to get back in. I'm bowling well again. Feel a little bit better. Not 100%, but I'm getting there. And then the biggest blow that I had was it would have been 3 weeks before the World Cup started, probably, when we got told the squad, and we were down at Loughborough, and Robbo pulled me to the side and he said, "Look, I'm really sorry you've not made the squad. We're going to go with Beth Langston instead." So as well, think about the 4-year build-up that we'd had to that World Cup. I'd been quite a prevalent part of the one-day team and really worked hard, and I feel like I certainly was a reason why we'd qualified for that World Cup in the first place. So to then have my place kind of pipped at the final post was a killer in itself. But yeah, so Robbo told me that. He's like, you can go home if you want. There's still half a day of training left, but get home, and I know you're going to be upset about this. And I said to him, Robbo, I've come down with Hartley. I said, I'm going to have to wait because she's driving me home. So I then had to hang around for 4 hours and wait in the car while they had a pre-World Cup meeting. And it was Hartley then on the flip side of that has been selected. Can't ring her parents in the car to tell them because I'm in the car crying. So it was just, oh God, that was a terrible experience as well. But that was almost worse than the tournament, because once the tournament started, I was out of it. I wasn't part of the squad. I wasn't training with them. So it was almost like I could shut a door on that. And I must admit, I didn't really follow the games as well as I should have done, with some of my mates playing in it. I supported Hartley, obviously, and made sure that she was all right and enjoying herself and what best mates should do. But in terms of the cricket, I couldn't tell you who they played, what the scores were, who got runs or anything like that until the semi-final and the final.
Yeah, that's pretty tough situation. But you did mention doing some work with your psych, sort of after that breakdown at Loughborough. What were those conversations like? And you mentioned he kind of explained what was going on in your head, that you couldn't quite see it. So what were the findings in those conversations? What do they look like?
We did a lot of work, again, really cliche, but he was like, did you have a good childhood? I was like, oh, mate, this is nothing to do with my childhood. My childhood was fine. And then he was like, no, stop. Let's actually delve into this a little bit. And we actually unraveled what you brought up really early on, was my family dynamic, and how my dad was, in his time, he was a famous footballer. If he had his time again now, I'm not sure he would have been as big, or the standards obviously improved or changed a lot. So people know who my dad is. When I went down to play cricket at my local club, my brother was first team captain. He was the leading run scorer every year at the club. Everyone knew who I was because Bobby had a little sister who played cricket. So everywhere I went, I was either David Crossy's daughter, Bobby Crossy's sister, or Jenny Crossy's sister. I was never Kate. I was never just my own little person. And the stuff that I worked with on the psych was how that has affected me from not pressure, but maybe an expectation level from such an early age. And then even I think I put that expectation on myself because I'd had the role models in my family of, my dad playing professional sport, my brother played for Lancashire for 2 years, he was professional there, my sister was trialing for England netball. So yeah, that expectation I think was I have to do something worthwhile. And for me, that was cricket or playing sport. I remember even my first England tour, in the little programs that you get, it said under my picture, like my date of birth, age, whatever, David Cross's, or ex-West Ham footballer David Cross's daughter, Kate Cross. And that was the first thing about me and my England career. It was about my dad.
Really?
Yeah, and so it was no one's fault.
Yeah.
It was just naturally, like, we do it all the time.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, you, like with Tiger Woods' son, I can see that happening to him in the press already. Obviously not saying my dad was anywhere near as famous as Tiger Woods, but you know what I mean. Like, there's just that expectation that they're going to be something or do something. So that was one avenue that we looked at, and then I had to have some pretty like deep and meaningful chats with my parents, and they came to these sessions, and that was really difficult for me because we've never been a family that, like, we're not a touchy-feely, we're not a lovey-dovey kind of family, but we'll all support each other. But that support comes it's like just quite subtly, I guess. And so I had, I'd sit and be really open and honest with my parents about that Pakistan game and say how I felt like I'd let them down, and that I feel like every time they watch me that I want to put in a really good performance and get man of the match, and prove all, why they put all those hours into me training and driving me up and down the country for so many years. And my mum and dad sat there and they're like, are you being serious? They were like, we're just so proud of the fact that you play for England. Like, we're proud of the fact when you turn out for Hayward, we're just proud of you. It doesn't matter if you do well. We're proud of what you're doing, not how you do it or, the outcome of it. So that was quite a big turning point as well, because I kind of had that, I'd never had that conversation with my parents, and especially for my dad to say something like that as well. Like, my dad was that really tough, old school kind of bloke who, like, if you broke your arm, it was, oh, just get on with it and crack on, like that kind of mentality that came probably in the 70s and the 80s. So, like, he's openly said as well how seeing what I've had to go through with my mental health has kind of altered how he viewed his, and he kind of said, we never got this support when we played football, and I wonder what kind of a player I might have been if it had been okay to talk how you talk, how openly you talk about your mental health. And then the rest of it came around the performance side of, like, the performance anxiety of the cricket and the actual physical aspect of cricket. Of this is what I was going to touch on earlier. It's that not willing to put myself outside my comfort zone in order to get better. So I was actually just doing what I'd done back when Lisa had me in the academy, and just kind of doing what I'd always done and never pushing myself, because I was so frightened to make a mistake and make a fool out of myself on TV, that I then got so safe and wasn't willing to push myself. And then that became a vicious cycle because I didn't know then how to push myself. So we did a lot of work on that as well.
That's really interesting. I just want to unpack that a little bit more, in that the most common thing that we see in young athletes, and a lot of the work I'm doing even in schools, forget sport altogether, it's as what we mentioned right at the start, which I was impressed you brought up straight away, is that fear of unknown, which COVID's brought about. And it's that fear of unknown. What if I try this in a game, and what if I fail? And if you don't have that grounding of self-belief, not self-belief as in I know I can land that ball, as in I'll be okay as a human, and I have value as Kate Cross or Barbie Devchand to be a human despite what happens out there. And the concept of FOPO. Have you had a FOPO before? So you've got FOMO, which is fear of missing out. FOPO is fear of people's opinions. And that's pretty much what it all comes down to, is why you're scared of the unknown, because we want to control, we want safe. And it's normal. That's because we're human. Like, we want to belong, we want to be safe. You go back to thousands of years ago at the cavemen, and if you're not accepted by the people around you, you're going to die. It's as simple as that. Or you're not going to live a good life. And that's where your brain's telling you that. But then that impact on performance in today's society is actually not real.
Yeah, I had the two things that I can pick out of that you just said that I can resonate with. The first question on the first day of me, like, working with the psych, he said, "Who are you?" He said, "What are you? What is your purpose?" And I couldn't answer him. And he said, "Are you Kate Cross, the cricketer?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, I am." And he said, "Right, that's the problem. Right there, you are not Kate Cross, the cricketer. You are Kate Cross, who happens to be good at cricket." your life doesn't revolve around cricket. It might be a big focus, but you don't live or die based on your cricket career. And then when we started to unpick the performance side of it, and I mean, for me, I had an academy tour with kind of around the time that I felt like I was getting better and was ready for the World Cup selection. I had an academy. I went on a trip with the academy and we went to Sri Lanka, and I started working on a new variation, a new slow ball. It was like a back of the hand. And I did this first session in the nets and I had a panic attack. And I've very rarely I've had a panic attack because of open water. You know, I've never had it in a sporting environment. And it was James Kirtley, who ex-England player that was working with us at the time, and he's talking to me, and I could literally, he was going blurry, and I could feel my breath going, and I couldn't control the fact that I was, unless you've had a panic attack, it sounds like you're being so traumatic, but I felt like I was going to literally die. And this was because the first ball that I'd bowled, I'd landed in the side net, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't do this skill, and it was, again, we unpicked all of that, and it was around, I'm a fast bowler. My skill is to get that ball where I want to get it, and I can't do it. And I just didn't know how to cope with that. So then when we started doing all the work with the psych, he was like, what is the worst that happens if you bowl that ball in a game? And I was like, well, it might be a wide. He's like, are you going to die? No. He's like, right, now we're getting into, like, we're putting things into perspective. But a lot of the stuff that I got so caught up with was, because we were professional, for me, I would then tumbleweed that wide and go, right, well, if they think that I don't have the skill set to play in this game, they're not going to pick me. If they don't pick me, I'm not going to be in the squad. If I'm not in the squad, I'm not going on that next tour. If I'm not on that next tour, how are they giving me a contract in April? If I don't get a contract in April, I'm not a professional cricketer anymore. And immediately I'd gone from bowling a back of the hand slower ball in the net to losing my contract. So it was like really catastrophic thoughts that I was having, which was so irrational. And I knew that, but I still couldn't fix that.
Yeah,
Unpick that.
That's the key though, in that, like, you can understand that, and the initial work that you've done with the psych, or even when Lisa dropped you in the first place, to get that base understanding is there, but the thoughts still come. So the next step is, how do you actually deal with those thoughts? Because it's called being a human. Like, they're not just going to disappear now that you found yourself and we're all going to be happy and rainbows and cakes and whatever that Mean Girls quote is. Like, how do you actually then deal with those thoughts? So if we put you into a game situation now, if we look at, say, a good example would be last year, you bowled that final over in India and they need 3 to win. What thoughts coming into your head? How do you manage those in an actual environment? And then how do you actually produce your performance on the other side of that now compared to a few years back?
I think it's hard to do, don't get me wrong. I think if you can learn how to bottle this up and sell it, Barb, you'll be a millionaire. I'll sponsor you as well. I'll get you on. We'll go into business together. I think a lot of it came down to genuinely just time in the nets, learning the skills, learning that back of the hand slow ball, so that I had like a combination of tools that I could then use in cricket matches that made me feel comfortable, and I was confident that I'd put the time in to get better at them. I think the other one as well is it was all about flipping my mindset. So where I used to think, if I bowl this ball, what's the worst that's going to happen? Now I kind of think, what's the best outcome that I can get from this? Right, I could get a wicket. That could change the game. That could mean that you're going to be, a real pivotal part of this team. So I think it's about, yes, seeing the fact that there's going to be risk with whatever you do, but also there's reward with that as well. And I'm not massively, like I said to you earlier, I'm not a massive reward person. I'm not driven by stats. I'm not driven by kind of the thought of playing for England for 10 years and being the best bowler in the world. I'm driven by people around me. I'm such a people-orientated person. Again, this has all come out from learning about myself and stuff, but for me, it's about how can I help my teammates, or how can I help the team win? And that's what I've learned has driven me. So when I am in those moments and I start doubting myself, the first question to myself is, what does the team need from me right now? Does it need me to be brave and bowl this slow ball? Yeah, okay, give it a go. They'll forgive you if you get it wrong. You've tried something. Does it need to be me to be like, the India example actually was a really good example of, I was just such a boring bowler that game. I literally just hit back of a length, which is my bread and butter. I didn't have to do anything special. I didn't bowl worldy Yorkers. I didn't bounce people out of the game. I literally hit back of a length and was boring. And that's what the team needed from me then. So I think it's knowing your role. It's knowing how those skills that you've learned and used in the nets. It's how to put them into games as well. But a lot of it's just experience. You just got to play. You've got to be in those situations. You've got to fail. If you don't fail, you'll never ever learn. And again, cliche, I know, but everything that I've learned the most from in my life has come from a massive setback or a massive failure. It's not been when I've been winning an Ashes or in a World Cup squad. It has literally been when I've been at rock bottom and have had to properly scrape myself out of that hole.
Have you heard of the term post-traumatic growth?
No.
So that's another random one I'll throw at you. You got PTSD, which is obviously post-traumatic stress disorder. And this is an actual thing. It's not some random made-up thing like FOPO. Post-traumatic growth is studied by psychologists. There are studies on it now. And it's the idea that after you experience trauma of some capacity, on the other side of it is growth as a human. But whether you go down the stress path or the growth path is entirely based on your beliefs and values and the story that you tell yourself. So what we can actually do, it's irrelevant what happens to you, another cliche here, but what the story you tell yourself based on this outcome that's happened, it determines whether you go down the growth path of learning more about yourself, becoming a better human, becoming better at your craft, or the stress path when you go to your panic attacks, you're choking. Some people quit altogether, and in normal life, so it doesn't have to be sport related. It's all that similar concept where it's not actually what happens to you, it's how you deal with it. And again, cliches are there for a reason because they're true. So it sounds like you've really leveraged that.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely brilliant. And again, it's easy to say, isn't it? It's not what happens; it's how you react to it. But if you know, or your go-to is to react a certain way, it's like anything. You've got to learn how to undo that. You've got to learn how to then flip it and choose another way of doing it. And I think again that just comes with experience. And 16-year-old me didn't have a clue how to deal with that. I was just doing what I've always done. And I think the more you grow as a person and learn about yourself, and like we do a lot of stuff like with personality tests and working out what you look like on a good day, on a bad day. That all helps obviously to be able to kind of unpick how you process all of that.
Yeah, that's really interesting because right at the start, I thought I'd try doing a thing for these seasons of the podcast. I wrote down, so I'll kind of get an idea of why you played, why you started, why did you choose cricket. And you didn't say anything about, as you said, numbers, striving, not even love of the game, really. It was community, it was relationships, and it was that feisty nature where you actually in cricket, I've got something to prove wrong. I could have gone netball, but in cricket, there was a little bit of something that kept me ticking.
Yeah.
And you've gone through this big journey of all sorts of things, as you do as someone that's living on the edge chasing a profession. And you found out, okay, I'm going to find out who I am again. And literally everything that you said there before is in terms of knowing your base. It's like, well, what gets me up? It's knowing my job in the team. It's that relationship aspect. So everyone's driven. There's no right or wrong on what you're driven by. But a really crucial thing I've picked up in your story, and you've done really well, is you come back to why do I play in the first place? And then rather than just remembering that, you're actually using it to develop as a person. So you're actually using and develop your game. Well, I really like relationships. I like community. I like my friends. And therefore, in a game, I'm going to use that to say, what can I do for the team? And that's going to bring about my best individual performance. Does that make sense? Where we could be slightly different, I reckon. Like, I'm a bit of a nerd. I love the numbers. I like cricket because there's so much to it in that aspect. So using the numbers to drive me works. And that's just the individual side of the game, I suppose. And that's where I think the best coaches come on board, because they're able to actually pick apart what drives you, as opposed to Heather Knight, Anna Shrub-Sol. And so the coaches that you've had, you would have had a wide variety across the different teams you're playing. Have you noticed any particular traits that have really worked well with you?
Probably not so much traits. More of like, I think time and effort. So John Stanworth, who I mentioned earlier with the Lancashire Academy, he now coaches on the England Academy, and he kind of like comes in a little bit and helps with the first team. So he's kind of like been at really crucial parts of my career, which has been, it's a really nice story. I've not actually spoke to him properly about this yet, but you know, he was right at the beginning with Lancs. The middle phase of like the 2015-16, he kind of came back in and did a bit of coaching with me then, and got me into a better place. And then he's obviously now with me at the kind of England better stage of it. But I don't even know what he does, but he just gives me his time of day, and he knows me as a person. If I needed some like real brutal advice other than Hartley, I'd be on the phone to Stanny and say, you know, have I got this wrong? Can you see it from a different perspective? And he'll just be honest with me. And I think that's so crucial for coaches as well, is that you trust that their honesty as well, and it's not just, you know, words for words sake. The other thing I do know that I'm not very good at is like when people shout at me. So our S&C that we've got here at the minute, he's had to learn this the hard way, but if we're doing fitness testing, whatever, I can't have him screaming in my ear and telling me to keep going. I need him to coach me. I need him to tell me to slow myself down, keep breathing, deep breaths. You know, as soon as you get in that turn, get out of the turn, be strong. Like, so I've kind of learned as well, as I've got a little bit older and a bit more experience, how I like to be coached. And I'm not a massive, like, I don't need an arm around my shoulder. I don't need people telling me that, you know, that I'm the best thing since sliced bread. But I think for me, it's like that validity and being seen and being heard within an environment because of that team aspect that I crave so much. Yeah, I think the best coaches that I've had have known that about me and have given me that.
I really like that. Not actually heard that one too much in terms of knowing how you like to be coached and communicating that. It's quite often you kind of know what you want from a coach, but it's not very often you'll go to the coach and be like, actually, no, this works for me, which you can only know through experience. So it's pretty tough when you're young to know that. And that could change, but that's a pretty cool point.
Yeah. I learned that again, like I learned that from experience, because he started shouting at me one day and I was like, whoa, what have I done wrong? And because I'm so worried about what everyone else thinks about me and, you know, people's opinions, like you said, that FOPO, I was like, whoa, I've not done anything wrong. And he's like, no, I'm trying to encourage you. I was like, oh, that doesn't help. Don't do that.
And then if you're talking about cultures and sort of team balance and things like that, is there anything that you think with the increased professionalism in the women's game, there's the downsides of it? Because now we've got more numbers, we've got more targets. You mentioned the England Academy now is more about the fitness side as well as cricket, and you can sometimes forget that love of the game. Do you think there's a better way to do it? Do you think we're there? What are your thoughts on that professional side at the moment?
I think you guys in ours are definitely ahead of us. Pains me to say that, but I mean, you're just 5 years ahead of where we are. Just, you know, we're just behind in that stage. But I love the fact that you guys have got I guess you've got the trust of the international coach to go back to your states. And I love that about training in with when I was over with WA as well. I love like the autonomy, I guess, of not autonomy because you had a head coach with WA, but there was just a trust from the head coaches that you could go away and you were getting what you needed. And I'm, again, because I'm so big on family and kind of my own space, and I think again that comes with like age and the fact that I now own a property that I actually want to spend some time in. I really struggle with the going down to Loughborough all the time and being away from my support bubble and my comfort zone. Staying in a hotel 3 or 4 nights a week just isn't my priority at the minute. I have to do it, obviously it's my job, but I think if I could change the system at the minute, I'd really push these regional centres that we've just developed and really push for high quality coaching there, so that then we maybe meet up 2 or 3 weeks before an England tour and get together as a squad and I think it's just at the minute that's just where we're at. We're not quite ready to go to that stage, but I'm hoping in the next couple of years, certainly in my career, I'm hoping that I might see that stage of it. But I can't really fault it, to be honest. Like the support that we get, like the science and medicine support that we get from the ECB is phenomenal, really. And I say that because we've just literally done a review for them as players, and it's made me think about, all the add-on and the benefits that we get that you kind of just take for granted. And like the fact that we get MRI'd every 12 months as seen bowlers to just see where we're at in terms of injury, and like that doesn't need to happen. It's not necessary for me to play cricket, but they're really conscious of our well-being as well. So yeah, I can't really fault that stuff, and I wish I had a better imagination to know how to make it all better, but it's just going to be funding and money and time that needs to go into it to get us pretty much to where you girls are now over there with the Big Bash and the WNCL.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree with you. And obviously that period we put into the domestic system is paying fruits at the international level. The development I've probably seen here, I don't know whether it's coming across from WA to Victoria or if it's across the board, where the idea you mentioned of autonomy is really starting to kick off here, and that's where true performance happens. So you have to have, as an athlete, the ability to take responsibility for yourself, because no one's going to feed it to you. But as we've seen in your story, when you were just letting other people tell you what to do, it didn't exactly work out well. So there's two sides of it, and I know Lisa was banging on about it when you were around as well, the idea of autonomy, and it took a few years to get going, but hopefully over in the UK, the regional centres have the best of both worlds, so you still have that really good high performance team, but then you're able to have players that can actually, you know what, if I want to stay at home for a bit longer, I can. If I don't want to go to training, we literally, and Vic, everything's optional. So if you don't want to go training, you don't have to go to training, and there's zero judgment on that. And all of a sudden you find, I actually really want to go to training today. So having that autonomy, and if you don't, if you get into bad habits over a long period of time, you're naturally going to fade away. Like you're naturally just not going to compete anymore. So it sounds like England's starting to get there. I talked to Naomi Tatani, who's one of the first domestic contracted players, and she's absolutely loving it, barring COVID situation. So it sounds like everything's starting to move in the right direction in England anyway.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's just such a shame COVID's kind of come in now. But again, it just kind of goes to show, I'm putting my ECB hat on here, but it just goes to show how serious they're taking the women's game over here. The fact that we got the Rachel Hayhoe-Flint trophy on in the middle of a global pandemic, when they didn't have to do that, and they contracted 40 new female cricketers in that time as well. Like it just goes to show that they're taking it seriously, and so they should as well. I think it's such a valuable product that they've got, and if they get it right in the next 5 years, it could be such a profitable one as well. So I think they'd be daft not to look into it and make sure they get it right.
Absolutely. And we'll finish off on a few standard questions asked most of the guests that come on. So the first one is, how's your definition of success changed from when you're a young up-and-comer England Academy style to where you are now?
That's an easy one for me. I literally define my success by how happy I am and how much I'm enjoying my cricket. If I'm not enjoying my cricket, then to me that's not successful. Love that. Simple but true. Easy. What is high performance to you? I think it's hard. It's what it is. I think it's a commitment to what you do, and the team that, for me, the team that I've got around me, it's committing to them and doing the right things by them, and just making the best decisions that I can make daily, really, to help the team or help myself, which will in turn help the team. But yeah, I think commitment's the biggest thing for me. As soon as I started committing to the cause properly, then that's when I started to see a lot more success. Love that. And the last question, who is Kate Cross at her best? She's a bit of a dick, to be honest. That's my favourite answer so far. She's having fun. She's like the joker in the dressing room. She's getting people up and about. She's having a laugh. I genuinely believe that I've been put on this earth to make people laugh, and that some people won't find me funny, and that's fine. But I think that's when I'm at my happiest, is when I'm making other people happy. So just enjoying myself and enjoying the people around me as well.
Speaking of humour, you do have your own podcast, No Balls with Alex Hartley, and hands down, I'm a podcast junkie. I listen to a lot. It is hands down the funniest thing I've ever heard. The name itself, No Balls, to female cricketers talking about everything except cricket, I think. So I'd highly recommend everyone having a listen. If you're having a bad day, you're certainly doing a good job of making other people laugh, with both you and Hartley. And also on the other side of that, I met you when you came into WA, and the impact that you had on that squad, which I know we've spoken about, is quite a tough squad to crack. The girls are pretty tight. We've all grown up together, but the impact you've had on those girls is unbelievable. The humour, the hard work, everything that you brought in as a person. And I didn't know your story up until then. I had absolutely no idea. And the ability for you to actually, as you say, make people laugh, have a positive impact on people. I can guarantee you there's not a single person involved in Western Australian cricket that just has the best report of who you are as a person, and that's a credit to the work you've done so far. We know it's not been easy, but I genuinely say that, and you're someone that I really look up to, even though there's not much of an age gap between us, but your story and the ability to impact those around you is unbelievable. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Oh, Barbie, you're too nice. Thank you very much. That means a lot.
No worries. Thanks for coming on.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in. If you want to continue to be part of the Inside Edge project, hit subscribe or leave a comment below. We're also on all major social media platforms. I look forward to having you along next time.